I always thought retirement would be the gentle chapter of life. After decades of long days, packed lunches, bills paid on time, and children raised as best I could, I believed I had earned a little peace. My pension was never extravagant, but it was steady, something I could count on the way you count on the sun rising each morning. It was my safety net, the one thing I thought no one could ever take away. But I was wrong. Looking back now, I see how fragile trust really is. It feels solid, like glass in the sunlight. But all it takes is one strike, and suddenly, it's shattered, sharp pieces scattered across the floor of your life. Pieces you can never truly fit back together. My pension came from years of steady, ordinary work. I was never a CEO, never the one taking vacations that ended up in glossy photo albums. I was the one who showed up early, stayed late, covered shifts without complaint. I clocked in faithfully, signed the paperwork carefully, and watched the contributions trickle into my account. Slowly, month after month, they became something I could lean on. When coworkers traded in cars every few years, I drove the same one until the upholstery wore thin. When others bragged about dinners out, I tucked away my treat money for birthdays and holidays. I wasn't stingy, I was careful. Because deep down, I knew a day would come when I wouldn't have the same energy, and that little nest egg would have to carry me through. And when retirement finally came, I thought I had done it right. The pension wasn't large, but it was enough for a roof, for groceries, and for the small joy of buying gifts for my grandchildren. Of all my children, it was Daniel, my eldest, who seemed most capable with the grown-up stuff. He set up my online banking when I couldn't figure out the passwords. He picked up my mail when I traveled. Sometimes he'd say, "Mom, let me pay that bill for you, it's faster on mine." And I let him. Because when you've spent a lifetime loving your child, suspicion never even enters the room. I remembered the boy he once was, the boy who scraped his knees and came running for comfort, who needed me to check under the bed for monsters, who once handed me a crayon drawing of us holding hands, proud as if he'd painted the Mona Lisa. That boy lived in my memory each time I handed Daniel a password or a stack of papers. It felt natural. I had taken care of him for so long. Now it was his turn to take care of me. Or so I believed. The first cracks were barely visible. A statement that arrived late. A bill that bounced even though I was sure there was money. A polite call from the pension office that I brushed off as some clerical mix-up. "Daniel," I remember saying one afternoon, waving a letter in my hand, "they keep sending me notices I don't understand. Can you take a look?" He smiled easily, calm as ever. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just technical stuff. I'll handle it." And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, my flesh, my blood. I thought maybe this was just the price of aging, handing things over to the next generation. What I didn't realize was that what I was really handing over wasn't just paperwork. It was trust. My days back then were simple and steady. I'd rise early, make tea, and settle by the window with my crossword puzzle. Sometimes I'd call a neighbor, sometimes watch the grandchildren after school. Sometimes move through the house in slow, careful rhythms. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And every month, like clockwork, the pension was supposed to arrive. It gave my life rhythm, the same way paychecks once had. I remember telling Daniel once, "As long as that pension keeps coming, he'll never have to worry about being a burden." He rested his hand on my shoulder. "You'll never be a burden, Mom." At the time, those words wrapped around me like a blanket. Now, when I replay them, they feel more like a warning I didn't hear. We like to think of trust as a decision, but often, it's automatic. Doubt feels heavier than belief. Doubt means confrontation. Doubt means looking at someone you love and asking, "Could you really do this to me?" So we choose trust instead. And I trusted Daniel with small things at first. Logging into my account when I forgot my password. Signing me up for paperless statements. collecting pension forms when I was out of town. Each time, I leaned on him more. Each time, he nodded and smoothed things over. Each time, my vigilance dulled. That's how betrayal works. Not all at once, but slowly. It asks you to give a little, then a little more, until suddenly, you've given everything. I didn't know it then, but the foundation of my security was already crumbling. While I sipped tea and watched the birds flutter at the feeder, transactions I hadn't authorized were already in motion. While I told myself my son was taking care of me, he was really taking care of himself. And the cruelest part? How ordinary those days felt. How safe. How calm. I laughed when Daniel told me not to worry about boring paperwork. I let him carry my trust like loose change in his pocket. Because to me, he wasn't just my son. He was the keeper of my peace. Until I discovered he was also the thief of it. Sometimes I wonder, if I had caught on earlier, would I have done anything differently? Would I have asked sharper questions, braced myself better, protected what I had built? But hindsight is cruel. It shows you the storm after you're already drenched. At the time, I only saw what I wanted to see, a son helping his mother. A pension steady in the bank. A life that was safe and predictable. If I had seen the clouds forming, I might have locked the doors, closed the windows, demanded answers. Instead, I sat by the window with my cup of tea, completely unaware that the rain had already begun to fall. It started with the smallest crack, barely visible, the kind you might see in the corner of a window pane and tell yourself isn't worth worrying about. But soon, the crack stretched. And then it spread. That's how it was with my pension. The first moment of unease came one morning when I was balancing my checkbook. Yes, I still kept a paper ledger, even though Daniel teased me for it. I liked the feel of pen on paper, the tidy rows of numbers, the sense of control. But on that day, something didn't line up. The pension deposit was short. Not missing, just short. The amount that had always been steady was suddenly off by a few $100s. Probably taxes, I muttered to myself. Or a clerical error. Still, it nagged at me. I circled the number in red ink, planning to call the office later. But then the phone rang, the day swept me away, and I told myself it wasn't urgent. A week later, I brought it up to Daniel while he was sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. "Danny," I said, sliding the statement across the table, "look at this. Doesn't it seem low?" He glanced at it, gave one of his practiced half-smiles, and said, "Oh, Mom, that's just an adjustment. Sometimes the payout fluctuates a little. I can call and check if you want." I should have pressed him. I should have insisted on seeing the paperwork with my own eyes. But instead, I nodded. "If you could, that'd be great." He tapped his phone, pretended to scroll through something official-looking, and then said, "Yep, it's nothing. Don't worry." And I didn't. Because it was easier not to. Months later, the real problem showed itself. I had set aside a little cushion, money meant for household repairs. My roof had a leak, and I planned to use part of the pension to cover it. But when I went to withdraw the money, the balance was far lower than I remembered. Too low. At first, I thought I was losing my memory. I sat at the computer, glasses perched on my nose, squinting at the screen, muttering, "That can't be right. That's not what it was last month." I called Daniel into the room. "Danny, look at this. Did I do something wrong?" He leaned over, hands on the back of my chair, and chuckled. "You're fine, Mom. Sometimes. The bank site lags. Let me check from my phone." He pulled it out, tapped a few times, and said, "See? Everything's fine. The balance is what it should be." But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. Still, I swallowed the doubt like a bitter pill. Because accusing your own child feels like tearing something sacred. Soon, unpaid notices began trickling in. At first, one utility bill. Then another. But I paid that, I told myself, rifling through my receipts. I had a little folder where I kept every record, every check stub, every printed confirmation. And yet, the bills kept coming. I showed them to Daniel, my hands trembling slightly. How can this be? I've been so careful. He sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said, "Mom, you're overthinking again. The system's messy. I'll take care of it." His tone was gentle but dismissive, the kind that makes you question your own judgment. Maybe I was getting forgetful. Maybe I had missed a payment. Maybe the problem was me. That's what I told myself. Until the day the bank called. It was late afternoon. The sun was streaming in through the lace curtains when the phone rang. "Mrs. Thompson?" A polite voice asked. "We're calling about some unusual activity on your account." My stomach dropped. What kind of activity? There have been several large withdrawals, cash withdrawals. Thousands at a time. I froze, the receiver slick in my hand. "No," I whispered. "That can't be right. I don't withdraw cash like that." The representative hesitated. "Well, according to our records, someone has been accessing your account online and transferring the funds." My pulse hammered. "But I don't do that kind of transfer." And then, in the silence that followed, the truth began to dawn. There was only one person who had my login information. Only one person I had trusted with my pension account. Daniel. I hung up the phone and sat perfectly still. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hall. In that silence, shame washed over me. Shame for being fooled. Shame for letting it happen. Shame for trusting too much. But beneath the shame, something else stirred. Something heavier. Something colder. Rage. It didn't explode. It simmered. Quiet, controlled, dangerous. Because in that moment, I understood my own son had been bleeding me dry behind my back. I pulled out every folder, every statement, every scrap of paper I had saved. I spread them across the table until the wood was buried under a sea of documents. Then I began to trace the pattern. Month by month, the withdrawals grew. Small at first, barely noticeable. Then larger. Then reckless. The pension account that had once felt like a fortress now looked like a carcass picked apart piece by piece. And Daniel had been the one carving. Every smile, every reassurance, every "don't worry," Mom replayed in my mind. And suddenly, they weren't comforting. They were mocking. By midnight, I had stacks of evidence. My eyes burned from reading tiny numbers under a desk lamp, but the picture was clear. My pension wasn't dwindling because of mistakes or clerical errors. It was being stolen. By my son. I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling, whispering aloud to no one, "How could you do this to me, Danny? After everything?" The boy who once cried when he scraped his knee. The teenager I cheered for at his school games. The man I trusted with my passwords. That boy, that teenager, that man, was the thief sitting at the center of my life. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the house. Questions spun through my mind. Should I confront him? Should I call the police? Should I keep it quiet to protect the family name? But one thought drowned out the rest. If he could do this once, he will do it again. Unless I stop him. I had always thought of myself as a gentlewoman, someone who avoided conflict. But betrayal changes you. The trail sharpens you. And as the night stretched into dawn, I realized something. My son had underestimated me. He thought I was weak. He thought I was too old, too confused, too trusting to fight back. But he was wrong. Dead wrong. That's when the plan began forming. Quietly at first, like a whisper at the back of my mind. But soon, it grew louder, sharper, until it became a promise. I wasn't just going to confront Daniel. I was going to make him answer for it, in front of everyone. And eventually, in front of a judge. When you realize your own flesh and blood has betrayed you, there are only two paths: silence or action. For a few trembling hours, I considered silence. I thought about brushing it under the rug, convincing myself it wasn't worth the fight, that maybe Daniel needed the money more than I did. But every time that excuse whispered through my mind, I thought about my late husband. He had worked 2 jobs, sweating in steel-toed boots and coming home with aching hands, just to make sure there'd be enough left for my retirement. That pension wasn't just numbers in an account. It was his sacrifice. Our shared promise for dignity in old age. And Daniel had treated it like his own private piggy bank. No. Silence was not an option. The first step was to turn suspicion into proof. I spent days combing through every statement, every transaction. My kitchen table became a war room, piles of papers, highlighters, sticky notes. I noticed patterns. The withdrawals always happened late at night. The amounts were inconsistent but steadily rising. $200 one week, $500 the next, then $2,000 in a single blow. And always online. Always through the login Daniel had helped me set up. Still, I knew my word alone wouldn't be enough. If this was going to court, I'd need more. So, I called the bank. At first, they gave me the standard polite brush off, "Well, investigate." But I pressed. I asked for IP addresses. I asked for login records. And after some persistence, they agreed to send me official documentation. When the envelope arrived, my hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages of login records, each tied to a device. And there, clear as day, was the smoking gun. All the suspicious logins had come from Daniel's apartment. I sat back, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Got you." The hardest part came next, pretending. Every time Daniel visited, every time he smiled at me or leaned down to kiss my cheek, I wanted to scream, "How could you?" But I didn't. I forced myself to play the part of the oblivious mother. I even let him help me pay bills, just as he always had. Inside, my heart pounded as I watched him type on my laptop with practiced ease, as if nothing were wrong. But this time, I was watching closely. Taking mental notes. Preparing. Because my son thought he was clever. He thought he could gaslight me forever. He didn't realize that I was setting the stage. The next step was delicate. I couldn't just march into the police station without understanding what I was dealing with. So, I turned to an old friend, Marjorie. We had met in church decades ago, and though life had taken us in different directions, she had one invaluable quality: her daughter was a lawyer. Over tea one afternoon, I carefully unspooled the story. Marjorie's eyes widened, and by the end, she shook her head in disbelief. "Your own boy?" she whispered. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I need to know what to do next. 2 days later, I was sitting across from her daughter, Alicia, in a modest downtown office. Alicia listened intently, flipping through my neatly organized folder of evidence. Finally, she leaned back and said, "You've got a case. A strong one. This isn't just borrowing money. This is fraud, theft, and elder financial abuse." The words stung, but they also gave me strength. Elder financial abuse. That was what Daniel had done to me. Alicia outlined the plan like a general before a battle. Step 1, secure all financial records. She helped me file requests to the pension company and the bank for official statements covering the last 5 years. Step 2, create a timeline of events, every discrepancy, every conversation, every excuse Daniel had given me. Step 3, limit his access immediately. With Alicia's help, I changed every password, set up multi-factor authentication, and closed the joint access Daniel had once convinced me was for convenience. It felt both liberating and terrifying. For the first time in months, my money was safe. But I knew the moment Daniel realized he couldn't get in anymore, the mask would slip. Sure enough, a week later, he called me, voice tight. "Hey, Mom, I tried to log into your pension account for you, just to check, and it wouldn't let me. Did you change something?" I forced a light laugh. "Oh, the bank said it was safer this way. Just a routine update." There was a pause on the line. "Right, safer. Okay." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. For once, he wasn't in control. And he didn't like it. With all the paperwork in hand, Alicia helped me take the hardest step, filing an official complaint. Walking into that courthouse, clutching the folder to my chest, I felt like I was betraying my own child. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to turn back. But then I thought of my husband, of the years of sacrifice, of the pension meant to carry me through the rest of my life. And I thought of the bills piling up, the sleepless nights, the humiliation of being treated like a confused old woman. I walked up to the clerk's desk, slid the paperwork forward, and signed my name. There was no going back. From that day on, life became a series of preparations. Meetings with Alicia, calls from investigators, endless paperwork. At times, it was overwhelming. I was tired, my hands cramped from signing documents, my mind weary from reliving every detail. But each step made the case stronger. Each step brought me closer to justice. And through it all, I kept the secret from Daniel. He still visited, still smiled, still called me Mom in that sweet voice. But I knew what he really was now. And soon, so would everyone else. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked older than I remembered, lines etched deeper, hair streaked with more silver. But her eyes were sharper, steadier. For so long, I had seen myself as fragile, someone to be taken care of. But now I realized I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. I was fighting for myself, for my dignity. And for the first time in years, I felt strong. The final step before the storm was gathering the witnesses. Alicia suggested we have statements from friends and neighbors who had seen me struggle with bills, from bank employees who had flagged the suspicious activity. Piece by piece, the net tightened. Daniel still thought he had me fooled. But he had no idea that the very mother he had underestimated was building a fortress of truth around herself. And soon, that truth would surround him in a courtroom, with no way out. As I prepared for the day we would face each other before a judge, I kept hearing his voice in my memory. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it." Yes, he would take care of it. Not with charm, not with lies, but with consequences. Because the day was coming when my son would stand, not as my caretaker, but as a defendant. And I would be there to watch. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood polish. Government buildings always carried that sterile weight, tax offices, post offices, the DMV, but this place was different. This was a chamber where lives were divided neatly into piles, guilty or not guilty, responsible or not responsible. And today, for the first time, my life and my son's would be one of those piles. The night before, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, haunted by memories. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger as a baby, his first day of school, his teenage grin when he borrowed the car for the first time. But then, just as vividly, the betrayal, the endless bank statements, the withdrawals piling up like open wounds. My heart reeled between nostalgia and fury, love and justice. When the bailiff finally called our case, my knees quivered as I stood. The state versus David Carter, the clerk's voice rang out. My son's name. My boy. David shuffled in from the side where the defendants waited. His suit hung awkwardly, slightly too big, as if borrowed. For a fleeting moment, my chest tightened. He looked smaller than I remembered. That was still my child. But then I remembered why we were here, and my spine stiffened. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, peered at us over magnified glasses. "Mr. Carter, you are charged with misappropriation of funds, wire fraud, and elder financial exploitation. How do you plead?" David's lawyer, slick in a tailored navy suit, rose smoothly. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The words hit me like a slap. Not guilty. He was really going to deny it, even with the truth carved in black ink across months of statements. The prosecutor, a calm but razor-sharp man younger than my son, addressed the court. "Your Honor, today you will see undeniable proof that David Carter systematically drained his mother's retirement funds over 18 months. This wasn't borrowing. This was deception, concealment, and exploitation. At its core, this case isn't just about theft, it's about the betrayal of a sacred trust. And we will prove it." When it was my turn, my hands trembled as I raised them to swear the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," I whispered. I clutched the edge of the witness stand, holding it as though it were the only thing keeping me upright. The prosecutor began gently. "Mrs. Carter, can you tell the court when you first noticed something wrong with your accounts?" I swallowed. At first, it was small. Withdrawals I didn't remember making. I thought maybe it was my mistake, or a bank error. But then it grew, hundreds, then thousands. I kept records, but deep down, I feared what it really meant. "And what did you fear?" The words scraped my throat. "That my son was behind it." David flinched. A tiny movement, but I saw it. The prosecutor placed a folder before the judge. "For the record, Your Honor, these are the official statements showing repeated withdrawals linked directly to the defendant's accounts." The judge flipped through them silently. Each page felt like a knife twisting deeper. Then came the defense. David's lawyer rose, voice smooth but pointed. "Mrs. Carter, isn't it true you gave your son access to your accounts?" "Yes," I admitted. "For emergencies. For groceries. If something happened to me." "So he had permission?" I lifted my chin. "Permission to help me, not to drain my savings like a slot machine." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer pressed, eyes narrowing. "Isn't it possible you simply forgot giving him permission for larger withdrawals? Memory lapses are common at your age." There it was, the insinuation. That I was too old to know my own truth. I straightened, my voice sharp as glass. "I may be 70, sir, but my memory is strong enough to recall every dollar I worked for. Don't you dare suggest otherwise." The judge's eyebrow arched. "Counselor, watch your tone." The lawyer smirked faintly, as if he had planted doubt. I clenched my jaw but refused to waver. Then David himself was called. My heart hammered so loudly I thought the whole courtroom could hear it. He shuffled forward, swearing the oath. For a moment, I searched his face for the boy I once cradled, the child who once begged me to sing one more lullaby. But what I saw instead was a man cornered, desperate. His lawyer started softly. "David, in your own words, what happened with your mother's account?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't steal. I borrowed. She said I could use it if I needed help. And I needed it. After the divorce, I was struggling. I thought she won't notice. She's got plenty." My chest clenched. The prosecutor rose sharply. "Borrowing? Can you show us one? Record, just one, of repayment?" David stammered. I was going to. I just didn't have the chance." "No chance over 18 months? No repayments, no discussions, no notes, nothing?" Silence. The prosecutor's tone hardened. "Mr. Carter, isn't it true you deliberately concealed these withdrawals by routing them through multiple personal accounts?" David's face drained of color. I didn't. Your Honor, We have documented evidence tracing the funds through at least 3 of the defendant's accounts before being spent. That is not borrowing. That is concealment. The air grew heavy. His lawyer barked objections, but the judge silenced him with a sharp wave. The prosecutor's voice carried across the room. This case is not about money. It's about trust. A mother trusted her son, and he chose deception. He exploited not only her finances, but her faith in him. The evidence is clear. We ask for conviction on all charges. David's lawyer countered. This is a family matter, not a crime. My client acted out of desperation, not malice. Do not turn hardship into a felony. Resolve this where it belongs, at the dinner table, not in federal court. The judge leaned forward, her voice deliberate and firm. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony, the court finds the defendant, David Carter, guilty on all counts. A gasp escaped me. My son collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. Sentencing will follow, the judge continued. But let it be clear, exploitation of a vulnerable family member is not a private squabble. It is a crime. And this court will treat it as such. Her gavel cracked like thunder. David's eyes met mine briefly as the bailiff led him away. But there was no apology, no regret, just raw, unfiltered anger. It cut into me like a blade, but I refused to look away. I held his gaze until the door shut. And in the silence that followed, I knew something between us had shattered beyond repair. Yet beneath the grief, another feeling stirred, relief. Not triumph, not joy, but relief. I hadn't wanted this ending, but I had needed it. Justice wasn't only for me, it was a statement that what he had done was wrong, and the world now recognized it. When the judge's gavel struck, the sound stayed with me long after the courtroom emptied. It echoed in my chest like the toll of a heavy bell, reverberating through the halls of memory and loss. I thought the word would bring me peace. After all, ID fought tooth and nail for this moment. ID combed through statements, endured cross-examination, and faced whispers that I was a cruel mother dragging her own child through court. But now that the verdict had landed, I felt hollow, as though a piece of me had been carved out and left behind in that courtroom. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Courtrooms hand down judgments, but families hand down consequences. When we walked out into the cool afternoon air, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing and microphones pushing toward my face. Mrs. Carter, do you feel justice was served? Do you have anything to say to your son? Do you regret taking this to court? I pulled my cardigan tighter and kept walking. I didn't want to become a soundbite. This wasn't about spectacle, it was about survival. My neighbor Clara had come with me for support. She linked her arm through mine. You did the right thing, she whispered. Don't let them make you doubt that. But doubt was already clawing at me. That night, I sat in my recliner, staring at the muted television. For years, my home had been my sanctuary. Now it felt like a hollow shell. News travels faster than wildfire in families. By morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Mom, how could you do this to David? My eldest daughter, Marie, demanded. Her voice was clipped with anger. I didn't do this to him, I said. He did this to himself. He's your son. You don't drag family business into court. Family business? My voice cracked. Marie, he stole my pension. My life savings. That's not family business, that's a crime. She fell silent, then muttered, You could have handled it differently, before hanging up. Others were harsher. A cousin left a voicemail calling me heartless. An aunt said I'd ruined David's future. But my younger brother Thomas arrived with takeout and a hug. You did what had to be done, he told me. And I clung to that. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was generational. Some still believed mothers should sacrifice endlessly. Others saw what I saw. Sacrifice has limits, and accountability has to begin somewhere. At church, whispers followed me down the pews. A woman leaned in and said, "I can't believe you'd send your own child to jail." "I didn't send him," I replied quietly. "He sent himself." After the service, the pastor stopped me. "Remember," he said gently, "justice and forgiveness can live side by side." I nodded, though inside I bristled. Forgiveness felt like a mountain I wasn't ready to climb. Neighbors reacted differently too. Some dropped by with casseroles. Others avoided me, as though holding my son accountable was the real crime. From jail, David spun his tale. He told Marie and others that I was vindictive, that I cared more about money than him. "Do you believe that?" I asked Marie when she repeated it. She hesitated. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Even behind bars, he was using the same charm that had fooled so many. But charm couldn't refill the pension head drained. The loneliness hit hardest at night. I replayed every choice. Could I have done more, waited longer, forgiven again? But each time, I reminded myself, I had given him time. I had given him chances. He had refused help. And yet, knowing that didn't ease the ache. I mourned not just the son ID lost to greed, but the family unity I once believed in. Amid the storm, light still broke through. My bank manager called. Most people never speak up. "You did. Be proud." At the grocery store, a woman whispered, "My brother did the same to our mother. She never pressed charges. She lost everything. You did what she couldn't." Her words cut deep. Maybe this wasn't just about me. Maybe, in some small way, my fight was for others too. Weeks became months as David awaited sentencing. Family gatherings grew tense. Marie refused to visit. Elaine stood by me but sighed one night, "I can't keep being the referee." "I never wanted to tear this family apart," I whispered. "You didn't," Elaine said. "You just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." Her words hurt, but they rang true. Alone in my home, I began to write every detail, every feeling. At first, just to unburden myself. But soon I realized this wasn't only about loss. It was about courage. I had chosen the harder path. Love didn't mean enabling. Motherhood didn't mean martyrdom. And though it left scars, it also left strength. By sentencing day, the noise had dulled. The whispers still came, the family still fractured, the grief still raw. But I stood a little taller. I knew forgiveness wasn't near. I knew healing would take time. But I also knew this: I had survived the storm. And for the first time in a long while, I believed that was enough. When the storm of trials and fallout finally settled, I found myself standing in the quiet aftermath of my choices. The house was the same, the walls painted with familiar memories, the recliner still in its corner, the garden blooming as spring returned. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I was no longer the woman who believed motherhood meant endless giving, endless forgiving, endless bending until my back snapped. I was someone new, a woman who had been forced to reckon with the weight of love and the cost of justice. And as I sat with that truth day after day, I realized my story wasn't just about betrayal or courtroom battles. It was about what came after, the lessons, the scars, and the legacy I would leave behind. At first, reflection brought grief. I saw David as a boy again, running through sprinklers, sneaking cookies, falling asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. How had that little boy become the man who stole from me? I questioned myself endlessly. Did I spoil him too much? Did I fail to teach him responsibility? Was my love too soft, too blind? But with time, through journaling and long talks with Elaine, I began to understand. Parenthood comes with no guarantees. You can pour love, patience, and values into a child, but at some point, they choose their own path. David chose greed and deception. That wasn't my failure, it was his. The truth hurt, but it also set me free. The greatest lesson was about boundaries. For years, I blurred the line between love and sacrifice, believing they were the same. If my children needed, I gave. If they stumbled, I covered for them. If they hurt me, I swallowed the pain. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. And enabling breeds entitlement. By standing up to David in court, I wasn't just defending my finances, I was declaring that my worth mattered. My years of work, my pension, my future security, they mattered. That realization reshaped me. I began saying no more often. I stopped apologizing for protecting myself. And little by little, I felt lighter, as though shedding a weight I didn't know I carried. Healing in the family did not come quickly. Marie stayed distant for months, her loyalty to David hardening her anger toward me. Gatherings were fractured, with silence filling spaces where laughter once lived. But time has a way of softening sharp edges. One rainy afternoon, Marie appeared at my door, her eyes swollen from tears. "I don't know how to forgive you," she whispered. "But I don't know how to keep being angry either." I poured her tea. "You don't have to forgive me today," I told her gently. "But I hope one day you'll understand why I did what I did. It wasn't a fix, but it was a beginning. And beginnings matter." In the wider community, whispers turned into respect. Neighbors who once avoided me stopped me in stores to say, "You were brave." A woman at church admitted her brother had stolen from their mother too, but no one ever spoke up. "You showed us it's possible," she said. That's when I realized my story wasn't just mine. It was part of a larger truth, of elders silenced, of parents betrayed, of families torn by greed. My voice had cracked that silence, even just a little. Maybe my legacy wouldn't just be about surviving betrayal. Maybe it would be about reminding others that protecting yourself is not selfish, that justice and love can exist together. When David was finally sentenced, I felt no joy. Watching your child led away in handcuffs is not a mother's dream. It tore at me in ways I can't fully name. But I also felt no regret. The judge's sentence was stern yet fair, repayment of what he stole, counseling, and classes on responsibility. Not just confinement, but correction. And I clung to that. Because though I could no longer trust David, I still loved him deeply, painfully, stubbornly. I hoped that somewhere within those years, he might finally face himself. As I aged further, I thought often about my grandchildren. How would they remember me? As the grandmother who dragged their father through court? Or as the grandmother who stood tall when it mattered most? I chose to shape that memory myself. I began writing letters, explaining not just what happened, but why. I told them about love, boundaries, and integrity. I wanted them to know that doing the right thing is rarely easy, but always worth it. Those letters became my legacy. A way of ensuring this story wasn't just about betrayal, but about strength. In the months after, I reclaimed joys I had forgotten. I worked in my garden, watching new blooms rise after pruning. I joined a book club, where laughter reminded me companionship could heal. I even planned a small trip, something just for me. A declaration, my life is not over because of this. My story is still being written. And in that reclaiming, I found peace. Now, when I look back, I don't see only betrayal or courtrooms. I see the journey of a woman who refused to be erased. A mother who chose accountability over silence. A grandmother who chose legacy over shame. David's choices will always haunt me. The fracture in my family may never fully mend. But I know this, I stood up when it mattered. I protected myself. I honored my worth. That is the story I leave behind. Not bitterness, but strength. Not revenge, but resilience. Not despair, but dignity. And if my journey teaches even one person that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, then every scar was worth it. In the end, my son may have stolen my pension, but he did not steal my spirit. The courtroom may have divided my family, but it also revealed my courage. I am not just a victim. I am not just a mother. I am a woman who found her voice when silence was no longer an option. And that is my legacy,